the best coaches in the game. We really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmet's casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many. Tick your check. Oh man, shit. They got us fucked up. Army, regroup. We pledge always to have that edge. We don't fire warning shots. Competition just dropped. We locked and loaded before lock. Whatever the time, yeah. Do you even correlate?
Being the best requires a willingness to outwork your competition. There's always someone smarter, faster, sharper, more naturally gifted to come around.
Welcome back, DFS Army. It's FantasyFling. We are doing a week 8 look back at the Milly Maker and some MME strategy of top DFS pros. It was an exciting week in the Milly Maker. There were some stacks, the Miami stack specifically. DFS Army was all over it. So were some of the top DFS pros. So let's go ahead and take a peek. All right, so this is a write-up that I do each week, of course. This is over at dfsarmy.com under articles. I also tweet it out when I write it at FantasyFling, so give me a follow if you want that ASAP. So shout out to Sensational Power Rankings, because what you will see with this winning Milly Maker build is, if you're a DFS Army subscriber, you will have seen that the power rankings, and specifically this week's matchup, really predicted who was going to be in the winning Milly Maker build. So the top two games from a scoring perspective, we had Miami, Detroit, 57 points. That was what was projected. Obviously, you know, these games did go over, but from a projection standpoint, those were the top scoring games. And they actually, the Sensational Power Rankings, projected them over the Vegas totals that we got. So we projected these to go over Miami, Detroit, and New Orleans and Las Vegas. Now, obviously, you know, Las Vegas didn't get there. New Orleans, though, there was plenty of goodness to be had on that side, as they ranked really well, both rushing the ball and passing the ball based on the Sensational Power Rankings. So if you were targeting the New Orleans side of this game and you had Alvin Kamara, you obviously on the right stack. And then there obviously were several other plays that we were on, Minnesota and Arizona, that being a good game environment as well. As far as passing, Sensational had Miami Dolphins over 300 passing yards and over 30 points. So nailed it here. And this ended up being the top stack. And this ended up obviously being a chalky week, as we will see when we get into the ownership. And then, you know, we'll see that the top DFS pros were willing to eat that chalk. And what we had was a Tua to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill stack, and there were no bringbacks. So Tua got 32 points. Jalen Waddle had 33 points, and Tyreek Hill had 34 points. And then you had an Alvin Kamara stack as well, 42 points with the Saints DST, 16 points. Tony Pollard ended up being extreme chalk, I believe about 50% in the Milly Maker, but it didn't matter. He was in the winning lineup, 36 points. And then you had another stack. So really, there were a lot of stacks here. You had one primary stack with Tua +2, and then you had two secondary stacks. So these were very sharp plays. Garrett Wilson, I know he was coming up in the DFS Army domination station, our optimizer. And then Tyler Conklin at the ever variance tight end position. He absolutely smashed 25 points. So you had a team stack here in, you know, a game that was really low scoring. So kind of surprising that, you know, two players would get there with a game. The Jets only scoring 17 points, but nonetheless, they did. Obviously, when you have this much stacking going on, you can expect higher scores, right? So 272 points, which we've now have really an average of about 250. So we are ahead of where we were last year. And really, it's just been a few weeks where the stock's been really high. And, you know, we have 270 points, 280 points, 272 points. So that has really brought the average up. Now, The biggest stack, obviously, Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle combined for 100 points. Total ownership, it was a very chalky stack, and we're going to see that when we get into the Milly Maker, that it really, just because this stack was so chalky and ended up smashing, it was really hard to differentiate your lineup. And because of that, even the top pros who tried to differentiate their lineups so there's no duplicates, even their lineups were being duplicated, because this was a stack that was very hard to get away from this week, with no Josh Allen on the slate, no Patrick Mahomes. The plays were really obvious in some instances, like it was here with Miami. Now, secondary stack, obviously, this was the one where this winning lineup was able to get different. So we had Garrett Wilson, 20.5 points, and Tyler Conklin at almost 26 points. This provided, total of 46 stacking points, and then ownership just under 9%. And then obviously Kamara, based on a lot of the running back chalk, 12% normally isn't, a great leverage play. But when you got guys like Tony Pollard and Devonta Foreman, Donta Foreman, 22% ownership, and Pollard 50%, and Derrick Henry like 20+%. This was actually a good leverage play, and especially with the stack. A total stack was 13% between the two. So really good here. Stacking, just extremely efficient. And then ownership, this was another very high ownership week. Last week, we saw the winning Milly Maker build, 189% total, which had been the highest we've seen since 2019. This week, though, once Ezekiel Elliott was ruled out and Pollard was going to get the starting role, going to get the bulk of the carries, we kind of thought maybe we're shaping up for another week. And then Chuba Hubbard was out, and it just became obvious that, some of the plays were very obvious, and they ended up being chalky. And then obviously with the top stack being chalky as well. So Tua 21%, Kamara 12%, Tony Pollard 50%, Tyreek Hill 28%, Jalen Waddle 23%. And then really it just got different in three places. So Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin, and then the Saints DST at less than 1%. 174%, really high. And what we're seeing right now, I believe all last year, 2021, we were about right around 100% for the average. Right now we have an average that has climbed. So the first 4 weeks, we saw 102% for the first month of the DFS season. 102% average through the first 4 weeks. We've now seen it climb 17%. So we're at 119%, which is quite a bit higher than we had for all of 2021. We'll see where that goes. We'll see if it regresses to the mean. But right now, with back-to-back weeks at, averaging 175 to 180%, the overall ownership has risen quite a bit. Obviously, the top leverage plays now, really here, I think this was very sharp with both Garrett Wilson and Tyler Conklin, because Elijah Moore was out, and they obviously, spent a high pick on Garrett Wilson. He looked great at the start of the year. And then Breece Hall, who was their, young running back, he was looking like he was going to be next superstar running back, tore his ACL. They traded for James Robinson, but it was, the middle of the week, so we knew he probably wasn't going to get a lot of run. And so the focal point of the offense was Garrett Wilson and Tyler Conklin. Is these two had 17 targets, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So these were great leverage plays as they both smashed their salary. And then obviously the Saints DST, anytime you could take a chance, which we're going to get into in the MME Milly Maker, defenses are high variance. So you want to kind of take some chances on low ownership, take some chances on being on the positive side of variance. So you want to spread your exposures out. You normally, unless it's a defense and a fantastic match, just really low owned, you normally don't want to go in with high exposure, because you want to be on the positive side of variance. So you want to take some chances. And in this case, less than 1%, scoring 16 points. This is exactly what you're looking for. Now, pricing, I would say with this lineup, the plays of Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin, 4,200, 3,200, and then Saints DST, this average is really low between the three. So this allowed the pay up for the expensive Tua, Hill, Waddle stack, which was $21,000 total salary. And then obviously you were then able to pay up for a Tyreek Hill, obviously at over 8,000 because of these really cheap plays that absolutely smash their value. Tyler Conklin, 8x. Garrett Wilson, almost 5x. And then Saints DST, same thing. So, and then specifically Kamara, we know what his ceiling is, right? The reason why he is not priced above 8 to 9K like he used to be is because Taysom Hill normally vultures a lot of touchdowns from him. But we do know that he has that slate breaking ability, as we saw this week, scoring 42 points. So he absolutely crushed his salary. And really, in regards to his ceiling, he's been underpriced. So really good from a value perspective. And then ceiling, again, we'll talk about it. After 8 weeks, we have 249 points. So all last year, it was 200, I believe, in 33 points, which was 10 points down from the year before. So scoring was lower last year, which is why we were seeing more skinny stacks. But when the scores are lower, you will see skinny stacks and, the optimal one-offs and whatnot. When the scores are higher, like they were this week, we will normally see a QB +2 and then 1 to 2 other secondary stacks. So this week we saw a total of 7 players stacked, QB +2 and then a couple other secondary stacks. So really good. And then I will say knowing when to predict when there's going to be high scoring week can obviously be tricky. But if you trust your projection models and you have access to projection tools like the Statsational Power Rankings at DFS Army that had Miami offense going berserk, zeroing in on the correct stack is much easier. So if you were not a DFS Army subscriber, now's the time. 10% off a VIP subscription. Use code FantasyFling at checkout. This will give you access to the projection models, the coaches' notes, and obviously the nomination station, which multiple Milly Maker winners have used to win the Milly. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the MME strategy of a lot of top DFS players. Now, Grey Poupon is definitely a DFS pro. So I wanted to look at his lineup here because look at his ROI. And, I see him regularly towards the top of the leaderboards. He put 3. He didn't win the Milly, but he put 3 lineups, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place in the Milly. And all 3 lineups were the same except for the defense. So this is a player that obviously understands the variance of defense. So it was like, I love the Tua stack with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and obviously my secondary stack here of Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin. And then I love my one-offs of Pollard, Donta Foreman, and Alvin Kamara. I love this lineup, but what is going to hold this lineup back from winning the Milly Maker? It's probably the very high defense variance. So what Grey Poupon did was literally played 3 different defenses in the Milly. I believe we had Arizona, Houston, and Washington. It's not going to show it here, but 3 different defenses, Arizona, Houston, and Washington, and just smashed. And all 3 of them did well, and that's how you end up in the top 4 spots. You put 3 lineups in the top 4, and had the lineup been differentiated just a little bit, and obviously had the Saints, would have took the whole thing down, but still a tremendous day, plus 200,000 ROI in the Milly. You'll take it. So as far as exposures, what you will notice is obviously was very high on this game, the Miami game. Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, lots of exposure. And these are very chalky players, but over the field, 50% exposure to Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. So going all in, and this is kind of a theme that we will notice from not only just Grey Poupon, but some of the other top DFS pros, going all in and just knowing that is probably the stack that you want to target. And you're going to look at 150 different ways to differentiate that lineup off that stack. But if you have a lot of conviction that lineup is going to be in the nuts, it certainly makes a lot of sense to, as opposed to spreading your exposures out, 10%, 10%, 10%. An MME player like Grey Poupon can afford to have downswings where you go 50% on this game, and if it fails, you're going to lose that week a lot of money. But you know that if that game goes off like you expect it to, like you have conviction for it to, you're obviously going to set yourself up to have an incredible day, plus 200,000. So Tua, very high exposure, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then Trent Sherford as well. And I thought this was a good play just because of the low ownership. 18%. Obviously, he was in on this. And if you get a player who has that maybe 20-point game, and you're trying to get off of obviously some of the Hill and the Waddle chalk, and get some leverage in that way. I felt like that was a really good play to differentiate this lineup, and mainly more so because we know that so many people were going to be on this stack. So you really have to look for ways to get different. And obviously Kamara, really, really good play. Just the conviction to play Kamara at 50%. The field, only 12%. Outstanding leverage play. And then Donta Foreman, like 130 plus 150 rushing yards, whatever it was, on 3 touchdowns. So fantastic play. On top of Garrett Wilson, obviously had some Michael Carter. So it's kind of one of those things where I could assume Greg Poupon's mindset was, well, no Breece Hall this week. James Robinson just got here. Maybe they're going to just feed Michael Carter a ton. So a lot of exposure there. Obviously, Michael Carter didn't get there, but also had a lot of exposure to Garrett Wilson, which I said DFS Army was all over that too, popping in the optimizer. And Tony Pollard, 61%. So over the field on that. Over the field on DJ Moore too. So obviously, eating a lot of the chalk. And then also looking for ways to get different. So, yeah, everyone, even being on that Miami stack, they were also looking to get different off of the Tua and Hill and the Waddle. And Raheem Mostert ended up being chalky too, because the field is so sharp that even though, everyone's thinking about that stack and the passing, everyone is kind of thinking, well, how do we get leverage? So when everyone's attacking that same game, they're kind of looking for different ways. And Raheem Mostert was obviously popping as well in that game. So Conklin, Carr, not a whole lot here after the Tua stack. Obviously, there's going to be some TJ Hawkinson, some bring back options as well. A little bit of Cousins, Pickens. Okay. So I think that will do it for Greg Poupon. Now, this next player is one of the top DFS pros in the world. Need Lunch Money is currently 3rd. Now, the main reason we're going to look at Need Lunch Money, because overall had a pretty good day. And with this lineup, what I liked about Need Lunch Money's strategy was there were ways that he or she was trying to get off of the main stack. So you will see with the top lineup was actually Mariota stack. And this is something that a lot of pros were on. It was Mariota, even with, their passing offense, just kind of, they're not having enough volume. It's kind of the thing where Atlanta's secondary is really poor, right? So if you think that the Panthers can push the pace and score a lot of touchdowns and now force the Falcons to throw the ball more, obviously, this is something that can pay off when you have Mariota at low ownership. So you'll eat that Tyreek Hill chalk, right? You'll eat that Tony Pollard chalk and DJ Moore, but you're getting different by playing Mariota at 1%, Drake London at 4%, Boston Moreau at 6%. So this was obviously a game stack where it was pretty heavy. Mariota, DJ Moore, Drake London, and then Donta Foreman. And then Kamara and Monroe. So there's a secondary stack here, Kamara and Monroe. And then obviously just one-offs, really good one-off chalk plays, Tony Pollard, Tyreek Hill. This lineup scored 233 points, was 161%, so still quite chalky, but a very good lineup nonetheless. And then, yeah, you're seeing just trying to avoid a lot of that chalk. So a lot of the Tua chalk. So Justin Fields, 1%. Darnell Mooney, 3%. So getting different in the right places, right? Still doing a Donta Foreman stack with Kyle Pitts, which is obviously Foreman is real chalky, but Pitts was different. Mooney and Fields, that kind of is a stack in there with Tony Pollard, but just getting different in that aspect. Obviously Kamara and Amron, and then Jalen Waddle. So another stack there with Amron and Jalen Waddle. So this was Need Lunch Money's really the strategy. So a lot of exposure to Mariota, 18%. Kirk Cousins. So really, we'll look through here, but really no Tua. So Alvin Kamara over the field, 34%. DJ Moore over the field, 48%. So a lot of exposure there. And then CeeDee Lamb. This was also another staple of a lot of the DFS pros playing CeeDee Lamb, who, second week with Dak back, Dak knocking the rust off. Tony Pollard being very high owned. Let's play some CeeDee Lamb, 24%. Great leverage play. Ramondre Stevenson, he was chalk in the double ups in cash games. He was projected as chalk. So he wasn't in the Milly Maker, though. So pretty wild to see him being chalk in cash games, but not in the Milly Maker. Awesome leverage play. Dameon Pierce, that is chalk off of Henry. Direct leverage off of chalk Henry. So 26%. He was low owned. And then obviously, we went over Drake London. He was still over the field on Josh Jacobs as well. So, which, he had 31% exposure to Jacobs and 34% exposure to Kamara. I'm going to assume he probably didn't play a ton of them in the same lineup, but could have, just to get different, because not a lot of people were doing that. And also with Kamara being more of a receiving back, it's not really a negative correlation. But yeah, big on Mariota, obviously Foster Moreau as well, who ended up just being a really good value play. I don't necessarily think it was a ton of direct or leverage, because Moreau just being $3,100 with Waller out was a good play. Quite a bit of exposure to Fields. So yeah, pretty much just faded to it. You got Fields, Carr, but still played a lot of Tyreek Hill. Still played a lot of Jalen Waddle. So yeah, Kyle Pitts, Kirk Cousins. That was a game that was projected as back and forth. It didn't end up as high scoring as we had liked it to, but it was certainly back and forth. Played some Jalen Hurts. Just a little bit under the field there. Played some Raheem Mostert as well, a little bit under the field. A lot of it was chalky as well. A little under the field too, but still quite a bit of exposure. So yeah, did play a little bit of Tua, 9%, but considering, a lot of the other DFS pros, 9% is very low, as, we saw 50+% from multiple pros. Okay, so next pro we're going to look at real quick here. Now the whistles go woo. Top 5 DFS pro in the world. Almost a break-even day. So kind of the same with the whistles go woo. Pretty much avoiding the being heavy on Tua, playing a lot of Hill, playing a good amount of Waddle, but really just playing those as one-offs or small stacks within that game and getting different elsewhere, as you see right here with Kyler Murray. So, still being a very chalky lineup. So in some ways, kind of defeated the purpose to get off that that main stack, but and still be chalky, but still nonetheless trying to have a lineup that's at least not duplicated, right? So Kyler Murray, 4.3%, and then Kyle Pitts, low owned. These are really just the two areas where this lineup got different. Still Pollard, Foreman, Hill, Hopkins, DJ, so on and so forth. Now, this was kind of interesting here too. So this is something we'll look at. So this lineup, even though it was off the main stack, off the Tua stack, which was the hot stack of the day, still ended up being duplicated by several top pros. Obviously Blender HD, he does the theory of DFS, Roto Grinders, Get Loose. These are some really good sharp players, but yeah, Mariota 1%, Drake London 4%, and Kyle Pitts 5%. So overall, as far as how chalky the day was, 152% wasn't really that chalky. And then this is just Kamara, and then Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore. So Tyreek being and DJ Moore being the chalkiest of the two. And then, Kamara pretty low, all things considered, for the day. And then just getting different in that Atlanta and Carolina stack. Now, as far as user exposures, we will see obviously really high on DJ Moore, a lot of exposure to Kyle Pitts, Foreman, and London. So yeah, Foreman 32%, London 14%, quite a bit over the field there. And then did get a little different with some Minnesota exposures. Adam Thielen 10%, Kirk Cousins 12%, Irv Smith 20%. That didn't work out. He's hurt as well, so they just traded for TJ Hawkinson today, if you didn't know, if you've been living under a rock. But yeah, Tyreek Hill, 32%. So over the field there, but, getting different with some of these other players and some of these other stacks for games, Carolina and Atlanta. So Amron, and then a lot of the negative leverage here. Pretty even with the field on Justin Jefferson, fraction of a point. Under on Hawkinson. But yeah, played 14% Tua, which was very low for the day. All right, so a couple more pros I want to look at. Some of the top DFS pros, some of the biggest names in the industry. But one thing I noticed too when I was just looking at the Whistle Goes Woo, and I saw Blender HD and I looked at his exposures. Now, Blender HD is not an MME pro, but definitely a pro. He is a co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, How to Think Like a DFS Pro, and he does like Roto Grinder podcasts and whatnot. And normally you would see his exposures are kind of spread out. But in this week, obviously, going to be more high on some of the more obvious plays. And one of the things that really stood out to me when looking at this was some of his lineups. Even this is kind of the problem when everyone is on the most obvious stack, the biggest stack of the day, was even though your lineup was only 120% owned, which is low for a day like this, there was still another user with that lineup. So it was still duplicated. So, when you kind of have the same framework of your lineup, like this is how I want to start it, Tua, Tyreek, Waddle. So, quarterback +2, it's much harder to get different. So pretty incredible to see this for 120% ownership, to still see it duplicated. And it's just kind of the week it was. So the guys who really made the most money, and he did well for 15 lineups for sure, but the guys that really made the most money, had positive ROI for the most part. A lot of them kind of got off the main stack. And obviously if you hit it really good, like Grey Poupon did, it's perfect. But you will see as we get into the next couple guys, kind of getting off that main stack in some ways can certainly make for a better day where you don't have any type of duplication. So if you do win the Milly Maker, you're not splitting it with other people. So we're going to take a look at Osimo. Everyone knows Osimo. Obviously, he does stochastic and more or less, he's considered the top DFS pro in the world. So normally, though, in the Milly Maker this year, he has not done very well in NFL in the Milly Maker. It's been a negative ROI for the most part, but it wasn't this time around. So he had that Tua, Waddle, Gesicki. Now, Gesicki was a leverage play off of, a lot of the main stacks, which were Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill, as we saw. But yeah, he had Tony Pollard and Foreman as well, and then DeAndre Hopkins. So a very chalky stack, but and lineup overall 182%. Got different in a couple ways, but he did have a lot of exposure to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, but also Tua in Tua stack. So Tua, Hill, Sherfield, getting different there, 1% owned, and then New Orleans D, less than 1%. So, the theme of the day was kind of eating all the chalk, but getting different in one or two spots. So you'll see for most DFS pros, it ended up being a positive day just because that play was quite obvious. So Foreman. Now, I did listen to On the Contrary, and he was on the Carolina-Atlanta game earlier in the week. So I think that obviously is being so heavy into exposure is what ended up being a very profitable day for him in getting different, and as well as obviously having 50% Tua. So when you have a player like that really goes off, it's going to be a good day. That much exposure. So Foreman, 61%, Hill, 59%, Tua, 50%. Pollard, 79. So we're really high on Pollard, but it's not the highest. We'll see coming up next. Ramondre Stevenson, that ended up being a great leverage play. He had a pretty good day. Kyle Pitts, obviously, as I mentioned. Now, when we look in Kyle Pitts, DJ Moore, Mariota, London, Terrace, PJ, and Pitts, these are really quite a bit of exposure compared to the field. So a lot of leverage here. Kyle Pitts, DJ Moore, over on DJ Moore, even though he was quite chalk. Mariota, London, over the field. Terrace Marshall. And then, still over the field on Jalen Waddle as well. Now, the one thing you will notice about Osmo here is even though he had a lot of Tua, which he had 50%, the other 50% was very well split up. So he's still got different in his quarterback exposures. PJ Walker, he had Mac Jones at 8%, Mariota at 8%, PJ Walker at 6%. He had Davis Mills, Dak, Carr, Murray, and Cousins. So he had a lot of different exposures to quarterbacks outside of, the 50% that he obviously had to Tua. So it's pretty flat after Tua. Pretty even on Justin Jefferson. Now it's pretty crazy. Jalen Hurts, even though he threw 4 touchdowns, he wasn't close to being in the nuts because he was obviously a bit higher priced, and he really didn't run the ball. I believe he only had like 12 rushing yards. So pretty wild. Now, the last guy we're going to take a look at before we get out of here is McLovin. I've heard the geek call him McLovin. I don't know. I just know that I love Superbad. So when I see it in my brain, I say McLovin. He had a good day. In the Milly Maker, you either place high and you had a great day, or you lose money 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. So to MME the Milly Maker and have a positive ROI day, I'm pretty sure he'll take that. So his top lineup, same thing. Tua, Tyreek Hill, Waddle, and then he had another stack of Kamara and Foster Moreau, and then one-offs, Pollard, DJ Moore, and Freiermuth. 191% ownership, 238 points. So just eating the chalk, you see, with all these lineups. And again, if you're eating that much chalk, it's in a field of 200 plus thousand. It's very hard to have lineups that don't have any duplicates. As you see another lineup duplicated here by a top pro. As far as his exposures, so it was heavy on certain games, obviously. No, we had Tony Pollard 100%. So, I mean, lock him in. Less than 100% exposure. I'm playing with Tony Pollard today. I know he's going to smash. That's the conviction you have to have. And obviously he was in the winning Milly Maker build, so it was the right call on that specific player. So Tony Pollard, and then we'll see 30% exposure to CeeDee Lamb as well. Josh Jacobs. So was high on Jacobs. I was too. Didn't work out, obviously. The Raiders got in a very negative game script, and they just couldn't lean on Josh Jacobs. And the Saints have a good rush D. So, it's one of those things, ride the hot hand until you get burned. Well, you got burned this week with him. Garrett Wilson, all about it. So very high exposures here. Foreman, 44%. Kamara, 33%. Moreau, 22%. So a little bit of a stack there. I'm sure of it with that much exposure between the two. Most likely stacked together. And then, hitting that Minnesota-Arizona game, 32%. DJ Moore. So that was obviously one of the other big stacks, the Foreman, the DJ Moore. Olave as well, 33%. So in that same New Orleans and Las Vegas game. Tyreek Hill, obviously, had 50%. No, 11% to Tua. So not quite. I'm thinking of Osimo. So, but still, even though playing different quarterbacks, playing Cousins, playing Hurts, as we'll see here, going to have Tyreek Hill, right? Either in a small team stack or as a one-off because it was such a smash play, but trying to get different. So a lot of Irv Smith, 22%. I had him in Cousins stacks. It didn't work out for me either. Jared Goff, 10%. So getting different in that game, right? And in the first half of this game, if you stacked the Detroit side, it looked great, right? So if you had Jared Goff, and maybe you did a Jamal Williams and, or Swift didn't get there, but if you did Goff and Williams and you were just looking to get different, this looked great in the first half, right? And obviously Jalen Waddle, 26%, Amron, 17%. So obviously probably quite a bit of stacking there with Amron. Some exposure to Andy Dalton's, quite a bit to Cousins, positive leverage, 11%, Hurts, 11%. So even though had a good amount of Tua, overall was looking for ways to get different off of that top stack that everyone was going to be on. So Justin Jefferson, just under the field. Same with Raheem Mostert. And Tua. Yeah, under on Tua, 11%. So I think that's going to do it, guys. Obviously, the top stack of the day was with Tua, Hill, and Waddle. That's what won it. If you were a DFS Army subscriber, well, you had the top projection for the stack of the day. If you're not a DFS Army subscriber, now's the time to get with it. Use code FantasyFling for 10% off a VIP subscription. Also, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. I hope you all have a great week and win some monies next week. We'll see y'all next week.